For joining us today for this great discussion. I am Michele Watley with Shirley's Kitchen Cabinet, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to amplifying the voices and power of Black women so that we can be better advocates on behalf of the issues that matter to us and the communities we serve. I'm excited to be here with you all today and to partner with Community Change Action and the Black Freedom Collective to put on this important discussion about organizing for power. As you all know, election season is well underway. We're less than 12 days away from November 3rd. And in the midst of this, we are a nation still struggling with the health consequences of COVID-19, with over 200,000 deaths that have occurred in this country because of the pandemic. We're facing an economic recession and depression, and many of us understand how the Black community will be impacted in disproportionate number of ways, because we all know when stuff goes wrong in this country, Black people feel it, and we're gonna feel it the most. But today, we're gonna be joined by a group of dynamic Black voters and leaders across the country who are building power in their communities and connecting with voters on the upcoming election and their vision for our future. But before I introduce the panelists, I want to invite everybody joining us to post their questions, stories, and thoughts in the chat as we go through the discussion. And even to start, let us know if you have a voting plan for this election season, or if you've already voted. If you've already voted or you have a plan to vote for November 3rd, put it in the chat. Let us know that you're out there, that you're doing what you can to create change in the future, not only for November 3rd and beyond. Yeah, it looks like folks are doing the work. So we also want to invite you to continue doing work with us by signing up to be a volunteer and to engage your family, friends, and community members through voter outreach. All you have to do is drop your name and email in the sign-up sheet link below to join one of our weekly volunteer meetings. These meetings are fun. We have hundreds of people that join as we work to make sure the people closest to us get out and vote. So let's just get right into this. We're gonna go ahead and start with introductions from our guests, and we will start with Vivian Anderson. Vivian, can you just give us a quick introduction of who you are, where you're from, and the work that you do to create change?
Yes, my name is Vivian Anderson. I'm the founder and executive director of an organization called Every Black Girl, Inc., which is based in Columbia, South Carolina. Our mission is to create a world where every Black girl thrives. And it's our belief that in order to do it, the world around her has to thrive. So when we talk about what we do to make change, we're making sure everything around her is in place so she can be elevated into all the conversations and have a thriving space.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Vivian. Next, we'll go ahead and go to DeJuan Bland.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So DeJuan Bland, I am a lead organizer at Moses in Detroit, Michigan. Moses has been doing faith-based community organizing for, I think, over 25 years. And I'm not, so lead organizing, and my primary responsibilities besides developing new staff is our criminal justice reform work. When I'm not organizing, I am an artist and a minister.
All right, thank you, DeJuan. And last but certainly not least, Ms. Deborah Harris.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, afternoon, everyone. My name is Deborah Harris. I'm the executive director for Action Now and Action Now Institute here in Chicago, Illinois. And so we work toward racial, social, and economic justice in the Black community for Black families, people from directly impacted communities, to make sure they are self-actualizing and realizing their potential and their leadership and voice and changing the way they want their neighborhoods, their city, their wards, their state to look. And so I'm very excited to be here today to, help contribute to how we build leaders and, how we just expand the conversation on what it means to reach liberation, for the Black community. So glad to.
Yes, well, thank you all for joining us. Again, if you're watching, be sure to put your questions in the chat, your thoughts in the chat. Let us know if you've already voted. Let us know if you got a plan to vote. It looks like Laura's got a plan to go vote in the morning. Map it out. Make sure the time is set. The gas is in the car. The kids got the babysitter. There's no excuses. We're going to get out here and make sure we vote on November 3rd and continue to do the work after this. So let's not even take any more time. Let's just jump right into this. It's exciting to have so many great leaders on one panel from all over the country. We got Missouri represented, you got Detroit, Michigan, you got Chicago. Like, we are all over the place doing the work. So from where you all sit, what is going on this election season? What is going on in your local elections? And what are you noticing and doing? And from what you've noticed, from the local level of what's going on with your elections in your respective areas, how does this impact the national elections and what we're seeing nationally? And Deborah, if you want to go ahead and kick us off, that'd be great.
So for us, like, like so many other states, we have like our own down ballot races. For us, it's, our state's attorney. We have Senate seats that are up. A big one for us is, Senator Dick Durbin's seat. But mainly, like, so for me being in this space, our organization really works to tie in like local to national politics. Like it's the great circle of life. Like, we can't pay attention to one and not pay attention to the other. So even when we look at like our local school council races that are happening right now, and we're an organization that works on equity in education, making sure that families have a seat at the table. They're shaping who is like in administration. They're helping shape, curriculum, X, Y, and Z. And so it's like, okay, we have these local school council races. We're fighting for elected representative school board. We're fighting for racial equity in our school system. But nationally, we currently have an administration that is seeking to erase how we speak about race, that is seeking to make it pretty much non-existent, saying that there was nothing wrong with the way America was built, and that they're trying to like penalize people for bringing racial equity and diversity into spaces, whether it's with business, whether it's with education. And we also currently are in the middle of a Supreme Court fight where the current nominee does not have a positive leaning to keeping, what was decided with Brown and the Board of Education. That is troubling. That is troubling as we're fighting on a local level to have racial equity and inclusion in our education. But also we have certain mandates happening at national level that will actually determine if we're able to do that, if we're able to get funding for those exact things that we want at our local level. So we're always trying to push and tell people like, hey, we have to pay attention to how everything is working top down and bottom up. And as we talk about like the Senate race, one thing, I've noticed with working with Black folks just over the years is that sometimes we get stuck in this mode of identity politics, where it's like, if they're Black, we want them in. Not every Black person is about liberation of Black people.
What? All skin folk ain't kin folk?
I'm just saying. It's the truth that's been around for years. I don't know why we don't like take it to heart. And so, listening to conversation, people saying like, oh, we want to vote, a gentleman by the name of Willie Wilson into office. He's a Black dude. He's done stuff for the community, but this is someone that is aligning himself with Trump, with the FOP, the very systems we're fighting when we talk about defund and criminal justice reform and XYZ. It's like, make it make sense. Like, we have to look at the through lines with things. So with our elections, whether it's an election season or not, we need to make sure we're looking at voting history, their stances, where their money is coming from, how it ties locally to nationally, to really make informed decisions that will get us closer to that goal line, and making sure we know how to work with people after elections.
Exactly. And I think you brought up a good point of this through line, right? Like that local and national politics and elections and advocacy work is connected. Vivian, can you speak more to that? You're in South Carolina. There's a major race in South Carolina that has caught all the national attention, but that national attention has probably taken away from some of the more local issues that are impacting Black folks day to day. So tell us what's going on locally from where you sit and how it ties, if it does at all, to what's going on at the national level in politics and elections. And Vivian, you may be on mute.
I agree.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I was muted. So I agree with so much of what Deborah was saying, because I think one of the things that I'm watching locally in South Carolina is that we are only paying attention to national. and like I said, not understanding how that school board position and those seats actually hold power to as we go up the ladder, right? We having our folks there at every level of the game. And so and I'm also realizing when we talk about this political context of everything, how our state Senate race with the Senate race with Graham and Harrison, because how closely tied Graham is with Trump, it's already a national thing, right? And so really paying attention to that, and then going underneath and saying who's on this, who's on the team of like equity, especially like we said, I'm one with Deborah, where the work I do with every Black girl is like really looking at how policing is incurred in school. And I'm not just talking about police. I'm talking about how teachers, the rules, the discipline policies, all the things they put in place, and who's most impacted, right? And so as I'm talking to community, it really is around like, hey, I was talking to somebody the other day who's just like straight up, they not voting. I said, okay, even if I can't get you to mark the president, can you go and vote on school boards? Can you go and vote on, can you go? And then there's still places where we're going to have those places. Because I think oftentimes folks like, I'm not a vote for a president, I'm not voting. But there's other, and elections happen all the time. So I think as we're in local community, our goal is how do we keep folks engaged after November 4th? Because that's how we're going to really build that power and that community. And when I say power, it's not like now we're going to become them. It really means how are we making sure it's equitable within us first? I want to be honest, within us first. And then how do we start doing that more like across the board kind of conversation? So yeah, that's
if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. Elections are always happening. Policies are always moving. Agendas are always being pushed. And when you have to, play defense to come on the back end when stuff is already moving, it puts you at a disadvantage. Dewan, I was hoping you could speak more to what is going on at the local level from where you're at that people need to be paying attention to. Because again, when I think of Detroit, I think of Michigan, battleground state. All of the national level considerations, implications that the presidential race may have. But as Vivian and as Deborah have mentioned, there's a lot of other stuff that's going to be decided on November 3rd and beyond. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, and I'll get to that national piece at the end. So I think, all of this year has been this very long dialogue about what does it look like to have our government fail us and not work for us, and kind of how as citizens we are the only bosses who beg our employees to do their job. And one of the big conversations that has been happening has been around like police reform and just how justice looks for Black and brown people. And so, but that conversation has been centered to the police for most of the conversation. And so we've been making sure that we've launched a campaign of prosecutorial accountability for our prosecutor and district attorney candidates in the region. We also have our judges running this year. So it's like criminal justice reform is not going to be held just to police reform. And you got like the prosecutor's office, who is the only person in the court that can set plea deals. And nationally, we have like a 96% of cases end in plea deals. So we're leaving a lot of unchecked power on the table. We have our U.S. Senate race with Gary Peters and John James. John James, who's a Black Republican, and Gary Peters, who's the incumbent. So it's been a very interesting race in Michigan. Rashida Tlaib also had to campaign for her seat again this year. I believe she got it. And then we have to prepare for the elections moving forward. Like Detroit has this mayoral race next year. And so it's really a practice of letting people know that voting just isn't this thing that you do every 2 to 4 years, but you have to be civically engaged 24/7. And the onus is on organizations like ours to make sure that we're keeping our people engaged in civic activity for 12 months out of the year, because Lord knows that they failed us in our civic classes. So you have some people who don't vote because they just don't understand how government works. And people are ashamed to say that. Now, nationally, I will say the attitudes and culture setting of our current president has led to a lot of wildness. And for whatever reason, Michigan has thrown its hat in the ring this year of being one of the crazier states. So I think just the tone and culture setting accountability that we have to have our public officials to clearly is not happening at the presidential level. So we also have to exercise like that locally and letting these voting citizens know these elected officials work for you, and we have to treat them like that and hold them accountable for what they do or don't do.
Yeah, they work for us. They asked to work for us when they ran for office. They asked if they could work for us and represent us. We granted them that privilege and opportunity to serve. And we've got to hold them accountable to making sure that they represent us, that they serve us, because that's what they're in office for, not for anything else but to serve the people. And when I think about what's going on here in Kansas City is in Missouri and in Kansas, we're seeing a lot of the same things locally. On the Missouri side, we have a very tight governor's race. We have a governor who has been endorsed by 45. We have a governor who did not put in place any precautions or protocols regarding COVID-19. And now Missouri is one of the hot zone states for the pandemic. And we know from what we've seen in the data that we've been able to collect, at least here in Kansas City, that African Americans are impacted by COVID by more than 50%. We make up more than 50% of the mortality rates of COVID, and more than 50% of the people who contract it. And so when we talk about voting and the importance of voting in national and local elections, the importance is connected to how you are impacted in your day-to-day life. So I would like for us to delve into that a bit. Can we talk about why voting in the presidential elections and why voting for your prosecutor and why voting for your school board is important, and be very direct about how it impacts you? Because I think the disconnect between your vote and what actually happens to you the day after the election is a strong disconnect. And I think that's why people don't vote also, because they don't see the connection. Deborah, can you talk more about the connection between what happens in your daily life and in elections, and how you're organizing people on the ground around that?
Deborah, you're muted.
Yes.
Thank you, Dewan. But I was saying, thanks for bringing that up, because, how we organize definitely plays into how people self-actualize and actually realize that they have to make the democratic process as regular as they grocery shop. Like, this is not seasonal. This is every day. And like Dewan said earlier, it's up to us to set that tone in our communities through transactional organizing, through deep organizing that happens year round, to educate our people, not only on how government works from the ground up, but also where they plug in to make sure they have a say, how they get rid of folks, how we build collective policy, how we work on legislation together, how we run people from our own bases that have been doing the work, that have just been like great community, supporters and advocates, and, to like put them in positions of power.
Yeah, lift up and place and position leaders who are already doing the work.
Exactly. And it's like, this is what it's going to come down to. Most people only think of the democratic process as voting. I'm like, no, the democratic process is between waking up and going to sleep at night, like it is. And there is a spot for everyone. So whether you are, immigrant, whether you have legal status, whether you are formerly incarcerated, whether you are youth, wherever you are, I guarantee you there is a place for you to plug in and actually have a say in what happens to your community. But it is up to us to actually present that to people and not use them just for elections or just for campaigns, but to actually work with them in a way that gives them the tools for them to wake up and say, you know what, this ain't right. Let me take this little hour I got in between my 13 jobs, my children, my education, my whatever it is that, even, homeless population, whatever it is, sex workers, corner boys, whatever it is, to actually find an access point to put in my 5 cents to make sure that I'm moving the needle forward to liberation. Like, this is the work we have to do. It doesn't stop after, a poll closes. It doesn't stop after, those things. And that is when I believe we will truly start to see that needle moving forward when we actually put the value on people's human dignity and them actually like being a part of this process of shaping their communities from the inside out. That's not really think we gonna move some stuff. We're gonna see like a lot of stuff moving like on a whole wave when we all get on that page.
Yeah, because it's become clearer than ever that politics impacts us. If we didn't know it before, we definitely know it now. But like Cindy said, voting and politics is all day, every day. But as you mentioned, when you've got kids and 13 jobs and responsibilities, it can be hard to make that a priority. Dewan, talk about how you all do that with Moses Action and how you pull in different actors and players, such as clergy and members of that sect. Talk more about how you all go about your organizing. And then Vivian, if you could jump in too and talk about what you guys are doing in South Carolina.
So thank you. Yeah, we do faith-based community organizing, and our main thing is training and developing people around building a public life and making sure that their values are protected in the public arena. And that's a process, and it's my favorite part of the job is seeing people go through that transformation. I'll give you an example of how we took some people who were not voters into avid voters and leading like voting education campaigns. We had some young people back in 2016 who just were very cynical and said they didn't want to vote. Whoever the higher ups were going to choose to be president was going to be president, whether they engaged or not. And, they just didn't want to vote. And then, throughout a couple of meetings, we had realized that they all had bad interactions with judges. And like, well, you vote for the judges that you'll see in a courtroom, and none of them knew that. Like, they thought a judge was just a promotion that a lawyer got. Once they realized, I get to vote for this person who has directly impacted my life, they put on 18 different town halls in the city of Detroit and actually like threw an early voting party and got 300 people to vote early one day. The other, another clear example for me, I started organizing criminal justice reform because at the time my younger brother was incarcerated, and just like as a big brother who loves this man with everything I can love a person with, felt so helpless. So I'm like, I can organize to give him a better world when he gets out. And we were in our state capital, and there was over 30 criminal justice reform bills that just were not moving through our Senate because the head of Judiciary Committee wanted to be tough on crime. And myself and all the leaders were like, we can't even do the work until we get him out of office. And so if we're not voting, then we're not really like moving the needle and building power. But, the people who vote are clear about how their day-to-day values are connected to the vote. And it's our job to like create that connection for folks, and even listen to somebody's story. Nobody are listening to people's stories to even hear where the gaps are missing. And listening and knowing somebody's story is a very sacred act. So we got to continue to do that.
Oh yeah, so act of vulnerability for you to open up and share with people, and we do have to continue to do that. You mentioned the 30 tough on crime bills that you all were trying to defeat, but even in the wake of the George Floyd uprisings and Breonna Taylor uprisings, people don't know over 100 local initiatives and acts have been passed to combat criminal justice. So where we haven't been able to get change at the national level, change has been happening locally and on the ground. Vivian, can you talk about how that impacts the families that you're organizing, or some of the work that's been going on to pass bills and laws and policies that impact the families you're organizing directly?
So I'm trying to think of examples because, like to talk directly, because I agree because I'll just be repeating what they said, right? But for me, when I think about how to get folks to see how it's impacting it every day, when we talk about, just in South Carolina, there's a law called the Disturbing the Schools Law. It's not a policy in school, it's actually a law. So in October 26, 2015, which is, next week, well, Monday, will actually be the fifth year since the assault at Spring Valley, where a Black girl was assaulted by a white school resource officer. The video went viral, and so she was arrested for what is called the Disturbing the Schools. her classmate, Nia Kinney, who filmed it, was arrested. And they were arrested. Disturbing the School said, anyone who interrupts the learning or teaching of a classroom or acts in an obnoxious manner, a year in jail or 90 days in jail or $1,000 fine. This is for K through higher education. So when we're talking about disturbing the school, and so when we looked at what was happening in South Carolina, that was the third largest arrest for juveniles, right? And at that time, a juvenile was 16 and under. So if I was 17 in high school, I was going to the adult facility, right? And so using that, so to know that these girls got arrested, she was slammed and thrown across for not giving up her phone, but that's against the law. It's not just policy. So when I can tie that, and when I can start, we had kids who were sent to DJJ, disturbing the school, because they kept coming to school late. We didn't check to ask why they come to school late. But you get arrested for it, right? We had kids who were teachers were saying they're talking back, they're being disrespectful for this, this. It's such a subjective thing. And they're saying, oh, well, it's for kids who bring guns to school. I said, that's a law. We don't need a law for kids. Oh, anybody who's selling drugs, that's against the law. So we don't need a separate law. But when we look at 85 to 90% of the kids arrested under that law were students of color. And so when you can start talking to parents, because kids have been arrested under that disturbing the school law, or they've been arrested or they've been in trouble at school because of a certain policy, when you can start making it say, because now you got to take off work. You miss an income because this law is in place, and this law is in place because this person, this Senate or this council person, this school board member, they let it pass through. They didn't amend it. So because of Senator Mia McLeod out of South Carolina, who had been recently elected at that time, she actually picked it up. She was like, no, this disturbing the school law is wrong. So we could get folks to say, okay, who's standing for your children, right? And so those were a distinct example of how we've been working to really tie it together for folks to make sure we're getting them to the polls. And yeah. So sorry it took so long, but that was a distinct example I thought of.
No, that's a very good example. That's an example of how implicit bias is embedded in policies, how policies are weaponized to criminalize our children, and how when we are not proactive, or when we're not aware, whether it's through our fault or not, we are made to pay and suffer. That mom that's got to come to court may lose her job now because she's got to explain to her job why she can't be at work because she's got to go to court because her daughter won't give up her cell phone. Why are we criminalizing our kids? Why is a kindergartner under that type of legislation anyway? Why are we arresting kindergartners? It's frustrating, but those connections are necessary because from where we sit with Shirley's Kitchen Cabinet, we recently were able to pass the Crown Act with our local city council members. It's another example of implicit bias. People think it's just hair discrimination, but when workplace organizations like workplaces and schools have rules that say you can't wear braids, locks, and twists, who does that impact? It's Black kids. Black kids are only wearing braids, locks, and twists. It's Black kids that are being told they can't graduate or getting their locks cut on the wrestling mat. As these different policies are weaponized and deployed on our kids and our people. And so we were able to get that passed with a unanimous vote. But part of that was organizing Black women in a way to show them that this impacts Black women of all walks and backgrounds, no matter your economic status or education level or partisan politics or what church you go to or who you hang with. You've experienced this or your kids have experienced this. And then setting the tone that the advocacy work is doable from wherever you sit, that you bring the skills, the insight, the passion needed to advocate with those that you have elected to represent you. And so I'd like to talk more about the culture of organizing Black families and what that really means to organize for power. I think we use a lot of these catchwords that feel great, but can be empty in meaning. Can you all talk about what it means to you to organize for power and what your work around organizing Black families and Black people? What is the work of the culture of developing the culture around organizing, if that's a good way to put it. And Vivian, if you want to start, you look like you were thinking, I'll go to DeWine, he ready. He's sitting at the mic, he looked like he ready.
Man, that's such a, it's so many layers to that. But I'll start by saying it's really messing with people's lives and hoping for the better. Like the act of taking somebody in the public arena, especially when the public arena has done all it can to like oppress and destroy you and your family and your neighborhoods, to say, I'm gonna go out here and publicly tell you that I'm gonna fight against it and change it for the better. It's not a safe thing to do, but it's necessary. And you know, the attitude for the work is you're carrying it every day. Like you are transforming somebody's lives so they can transform their neighborhood or their town or city or state, country. It's like, I don't know. Let me just say that it's like a minister. It's the act of trying to reach everybody for this salvation, this transformational period of their life. With the knowledge that I'm not going to reach everybody, but I can reach anybody. And I never want to sell organizing as this like silver bullet that if we all can just do this thing, I promise you everything's going to be all right. But I promise you we're going to make some things unavoidable and have some conversations that people haven't had before and give you some experiences, win, lose, or draw, that is going to, you'll hold on to it. I've had some people who've only organized for 6 months and some who've been here for the entire 5 years of my career. And it's one of the most valuable experiences I ever had, not just as an organizer, but as just a resident. It has given me more hope than I came in with.
That's beautiful.
All right. Well, Vivian, she looked like she's ready. And if you're watching, you can join in on this discussion. Let's talk about what it means to you for us to be organizing for power. What does it mean for us to have power? What does organizing look like from where you sit? Drop your thoughts in the chat. Drop your questions in the chat. And Vivian, if you could speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, DeWine. You just helped me. I'm like, oh, woo woo. But all these little pieces, right? What came up for me, here I go with these examples again. I just remembered, I'm aging myself, but watching Good Times, right? And when they had issues, they were picking up the phone and calling their alderman. Mm-hmm. When they, I think about the movie Lean on Me and like Joe Clark and everything, those folks knew, like those school board folks, council people, all these movies where they have these women or men who like really like stand up for a community. Like I always think about that and say, what does that look like? And the one thing when I'm looking at politics now, even when I was helping my father-in-law fill out his, having him like, oh, here's on the back, like I'm taking it in. And he was like, well, I don't know that person. I don't know that person. I don't know that person. And then that really stuck out to me. It's like, it's all these people running too, but they don't know people. The community doesn't know. They may not know everybody's name, like the alderman on Good Times knew the Evans family. They may not know that, but at any time a community, you running for office in community and you running for office and I don't know who you are. I don't even, it's like you haven't made an attempt. You haven't put, I think those are some of the things. So when we start talking about organizing it all the way it looks, when I'm working with my families, I'm really like, oh, I think about like, I just told one of the parents, in 2 years, we got you. We about to prepare you to run for school board. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's building that power that way. So as I'm talking to my young people and they talk about what their vision for the future is, I'm like, in whatever town or community that you're in, what are the ways that you're going to engage? Like, are you going to be on the school board? Are you going to make sure you're at every city council meeting or every school board meeting? Because that may be another piece. You may not run for office, and in between those voting times, you at the city council meeting, you at the school board meeting saying, hey, here's an issue that we have. And so I think that's part of the piece when I'm like, what does power building look like in community? And instead of just like, I guess I keep thinking of the word, instead of organizing, because that sounds like such a to-do thing, community building, because that's such a big thing to me, and like always community building. So when we're at these pivotal moments in time, we already have the relationship and we're not making it transactional.
Exactly. I mean, you said it when you say you're my representative. I don't know you. You represent me and I don't know you. How does that work? You are in spaces of decision-making power and I don't know you. I can't talk to you and I can't get to you and I can't access you. How are you truly representing me when I don't even know you? Deborah, can you talk more about for you, how you embody organizing for power? What is the culture around for your organizational work that you do organizing Black people and Black families?
So ditto to Dewan and Vivian, because it's about all of those things. And Vivian just reiterated what I was saying earlier, like transformation versus transaction. That is how people organize and politics moves in general now. So now it's up to us as Black people that are constantly talking about liberation, talking about transformation to create a whole different system. Like even the system of organizing wasn't built from a Black lens. It was built from a white lens. Mm-hmm. So we already organizing something that's like steeped in like white supremacy, like to be perfectly honest. And so, like, as Vivian was saying, we have to think about it as community building. We have to look at disadvantaged communities, most impacted people, oppressed communities as whole folks. As whole folks. Building power isn't just about winning a seat. Building power is making sure your mental is on point. Building power is making sure that we can talk about collective vision together without coming to blows. Building power is about healing about the disparities of white supremacy that put in your community like colorism and all this other stuff. So that let's build some internal power first before we organize around the issue, before we organize around the seat. Because if we ain't got it in here, if we ain't healed from stuff internally, we won't all have the same goal when we going after a seat, when we going after a piece of legislation, when we're writing a policy together. Because we not on the same accord. So we have to start looking at organizing as organizing our whole people, healing, respecting, uplifting the human dignity of Black folks, people of color, Indigenous folks, trans folks, the whole line of people that have been oppressed and marginalized, and actually do it in a manner that isn't asking anything from them yet. Like it's investing. I don't just see you around election season. I don't just see you around a campaign, because we can't even take defunding the police. Let's take defund. Yes, there are a lot of people who are for the defunding of police, but there are a lot of people who do not understand it. There are a lot of people who think it means one thing and think, it's something else. And so there isn't a collective understanding about what it means at the granular level and how it inches us closer to the finish line of liberation. And that comes with going into communities, in them, spending time there, educating, spending time with them, listening. Not talking to them, but speaking with them, listening to them. Does this make sense? How do I help them grasp this? How am I allowing myself to learn? As organizers, we tend to go into community thinking we know everything instead of having also a heart and ear to learn. So we
wait, is that for Black organizers too? I'm going to stop you there. Is that the case? Do you think that's the case for Black organizers? I think you see that with well-meaning folks of other colors, white people and others who will come into a community, think they know it's best and try to implement. But do you think that's the case for Black organizers doing this work?
No, I think with Black organizers, we're trying to shift from that. And I think there's like a clash. Like, Black folks, we know how to organize us because it is about community. It is about our heart. But we have a lot of other obstacles we got to jump over. And people telling us, especially people with the money and people in power, saying, oh, well, that's not how you do it. But hold up. Don't tell me how to liberate my people. So there's a tug of war happening there with the systems of organizing and what they're rooted in. So I do see Black folks, people of color, Indigenous folks, like going in and being like, this is how we need to talk to our people. But it must become a daily practice. It still has to become like a daily practice. And we got to be courageous about how we organize.
I wanted to add, because I agree that we are moving differently, right? We totally move different. There are folks who come in. Because, I'm a storyteller. I'm going to give this.
Bring the stories, Vivian. We're here for it.
So when I went to, so I haven't always lived in South Carolina. I went to South Carolina when I saw the video of Shakara being assaulted in the classroom. And I was like, how can I go support this girl? Like, I just want, just it was supposed to be a 2-day trip. And when I got there, I was like, I'm hearing people tell me, like, you came here because a girl got in trouble. Y'all always come in here thinking y'all can tell us this or that. And I traveled back and forth for about, I would say, a year to almost a year and a half. And then I said, what I will not do is be a drop-in activist. Either I'm going to be about organizing in this community and be in this community or not. And when I went, I spent like a year and a half just listening and saying, how can I be in a service? How can I be of service? How can I be of service? And I wasn't going to go move somewhere and then still go to South Carolina, move once, and then say I'm coming to work with this community. If I wasn't a part of that community, and you can be a part of community anywhere, but because of what I was doing and where I was, that's one of the things for me when I'm like, yeah, we get to be with people. And if we're talking about community building, we wouldn't be afraid to even go into some of the what we call worst communities, because we're going to build to a way where all that we see ain't going to be seen no more. We're going to have something where we like people going to want to, like they always do. And it's not going to look like gentrification, though. It's going to be us saying our communities get to be what they need to be for our children so we can create legacy. So there's just historical and historic, we create history. And so, yeah.
Yes, I'm gonna leave it alone.
Where you at, Dewada? You the preacher. Come on, I know you got a word.
So I agree, to everything. Y'all sent enough energy through the screen for everyone. I will say, if we are not, I think Deborah, you mentioned this earlier. Like most of the organizing models that we are using were created by old white men. So to think that we can read from a playbook whose foundation is white supremacy and not constantly have to check ourselves that we're not behaving in certain ways. Even in something small like attire, like there are some people who do community organizing. If I walk into a meeting dressed like this, they are going crazy. And yet it's about the liberation of Black people. And, so we have to check ourselves on like every level that we are not playing into the ways of white supremacy, and also respecting people's spectrum of ideology. Some people flip more tables than others, and some people just want to be the martyr in every meeting. So I think, but that not uniform, as close as we can get to a uniform message or understanding amongst each other, because there is this perception that all people of color are just on the same team. And all Black, we already said all skin folk and kin folk, but sometimes the only thing we share is oppression, and that's about it.
Yeah, that seems to be the common thread. I'm going to push back on the old white men organizing tactics, because 9 times out of 10, the tactics that they're using, they got from us in the first place, made it their own, and now we are trying to utilize those same tactics for our own people. When we talk about relational organizing, for instance, that is the tactic for bringing people together, and that ain't nothing but a phone tree. And your church has been using phone trees since forever in the day, going through and talking to the people closest to you. So what we do at Shirley's Kitchen Cabinet is we try to help the women that we organize understand that they already have the power. There is not power that needs to be gained. Black women exert power in every space that we step in. We have led movements since before when. If it wasn't the Women's Suffrage March, it was the Civil Rights Movement, it was the Me Too movement, it was the Black Lives Matter movement. Black women have always been in a space of power, but our power has yet to be unearthed and recognized for what it is. Power, it's power. And so we work to help Black women exude power personified, that you've got what it takes. If you got 5 kids and you just graduated from high school, there's power in making sure those kids are fed every day. There's power in making sure that you keep food on that table. There's power in making sure your kids go to school and learn so that they can do better than you did. There's power in that Black woman executive who's sitting at the top of the corporation, has access to dollars, understand where the players are, and can ensure that our efforts are funded and resourced. There's power in the Black woman news anchor who understands communication and how to tell a story and what's important, what the angle should be. And there's a place for each woman in this ecosystem of advocacy and change, that you can step into this space and contribute from wherever you sit. And I think we have to be better about, as even Black folks in general, recognizing the power we already wield and not feeling like we have to meet certain standards to exude power. Like you said, Dwan, with the dress or how we speak, that we don't have to adhere to arbitrary rules about how we present, how we show up, in order to create change and create power. So again, we've got about 15 minutes left. If you have any comments or thoughts, be sure to put it in the chat. This discussion is getting good. And before we transition to any additional questions from the audience, I want to pivot a bit. As we talk about power and change and what we want to see, what we're really talking about is a vision for what the future could look like for Black people, Black families, and the vision for what all of this organizing should be leading us to. So from where you sit and the work that you do, can you talk more about what liberation means to you and what is your vision for Black liberation? Especially in the midst of like a pandemic and a crisis like what we're going through. We are all doing the work. We love doing this work. Everybody that's watching and listening, they're contributing, they're doing their part. But to what end? What does Black liberation look like? And what is your vision of Black liberation from where you sit? And I'll go ahead and start with our visionary storyteller, residence in house, Vivian.
Yeah, I'm sitting here. Liberation. Oh, Black liberation. And I also think is this when I'm always talking about what our mission for every Black girl to thrive, and then the world around her thriving, and really looking at like having and not in reaction to something. So like really having vision, everybody living in vision that we're actually from a point of creation versus we didn't have, and like instead of the reaction to. So if we could say the safe schools and all this stuff, but it's really like sometimes I find it hard to keep visioning because it goes so broad, and then it scares me because I literally see Black love, Black joy, Black music. Like I just see it in a way all the time in everything, even in the midst of this pandemic, even in the midst of everything. And it's just like to have that, to have that be like that utopia be real, like all day, every day real. That, one of the sounds I love more than anything is the sound of a child's laughter, right? And like, what if we had a world, and what, like when I see liberation, it's because we'll have children laughing. And from an African saying that I get from one of my mentors, she say, how a community is doing because you say, are the children well? Liberation to me looks like when they ask that question, we can always say yes. So, and then my vision for this work, it lines in that, we're creating these pathways, not just for us, but like actually creating it for the generations that we'll never, ever meet, and like really understand like what it means to keep bringing forward and passing on, and like that reciprocity of it all. So, yeah.
Yeah, the give and take, the exchange of gifts
and I would
talents for moving forward. And as you said, yes, go ahead.
No, sometimes me in language, right? And I really want it to always be give and receive, because when there's a take, it's something that's being removed. Somebody first, it's give and receive. Like I'm giving and receiving versus I'm giving and I'm taking. Like, because taking is not just like exchange. It actually is so the give and receive of it all.
Give and receive, duly noted. I hope someone else took notes because I'm gonna be using that from now on. We need to watch our words. Yes, you are very correct. You're very correct. All right, Dewan, what's Deborah, it looks like you're about to hop in here. Tell us about your vision.
Oh, um, so I completely agree with Vivian. Like that's what we hear so many times in conversation. Like getting to that point where like abundance is ever present, joy is ever present. But also liberation is also being able to have joy in the midst of oppression. Like when we're marching and when we're fighting against the thing, like we break to self-care, we break to dance in the street, we break to like to rejuvenate, to like call on our ancestors and our spirit and like, you know, lift us back up, recreate that fire, like finding joy even in the space of darkness. Also, liberation looks like no longer being fractured in our collective vision, no longer being fractured generationally. So like your grandparents' vision is different from your vision as a youth. Like our vision should find a middle ground, you know, for how we build, how we vote, how we participate in the democratic process. Like that's like at the finish line of liberation too, where it's no longer this gap. And also that we are building our own tables. Like that's a tangible like form of liberation. And then we're also in control of like these systems that we work in. So right now we all work in an organization. We all depend on somebody's funding, which more than likely comes from a source that ain't from us. And so my brother here in Chicago just moved into a very powerful and liberated position, became the ED over a foundation that funds organizations that can actually like, now he's in a place where he can like fund the movement and fund the work the way it needs to be from a lens that is from us. Like that's liberative power, to be able to take what you built and dream and now you're able to give back to your people in a way where like it's taking them further in their work. Like that's tangible pieces of liberation, like being able to sit in those seats of power and actually give back to your people, give back to the movement. So those are just the different ways that liberation, I want to see it played out, and that can happen now as we move forward.
For sure. I guess I think for me, I always think of liberation as in terms of like, what's the end goal? What do I want when all the fighting is done? And I always think about it like just really actualize citizenship for Black people. Like we live in a country that we were forced to build and now made to feel like this isn't our home. Like where like Tulsas don't happen. That's my ideal liberation, that we can actually have areas of concentrated Black wealth and it will either be burned down or have a freeway over it. And like I don't know if y'all have this reaction when I hear like the first Black person to do something. The fact that it keeps happening today, like when I think of liberation, I think of a world where my kids or like my grandkids, they can't be the first Black person to do anything because we didn't did everything. I was just jokingly thinking about like I always tell people I'm gonna be an EGOT one day. The fact only 2 Black people did it is crazy to me when I think we are the most talented storytellers in the world, right? So I don't know. Like liberation looks for me like what's
Exactly.
the fight.
Dewan, do you want to talk about your vision?
Hold on. I'm so confused. So yeah, I don't know. I look for a world of freedom, liberation. You know, we will be Thanos after he got all the stones and he just had this little leisure suit on and was making breakfast. I'll wait for that day without the crazy. Michelle, are you with us?
You seem to be stuck, Michelle.
Yeah, she looked like she was frozen. It's like breaking.
Sure. So I guess while we're waiting for her, can I ask, how has you all's perception of liberation been changing the further you get into the work?
How has it been changed?
Mm-hmm. Or has it changed?
I don't think it's changed. I think it's just like expanded and grown to be more courageous. Like as you know, you step into other communities, as you step deeper into Black communities, it's just like, oh yes, we can have that. Yes. So it's caused me to like make more space and more space and more space to where my lens is not just local or state or national, it's global. When we look at what's happening in Nigeria, like my lens for liberation is global. It's like, yes, our people need to have all the things, be free from all the things now and from here on out. So it's opened my mind to what
Watch
else
that
I
with my
can do.
nephews. Not a bad thing.
How else I can teach, how else I can heal, how else I can enlighten.
Can you all hear me?
I think you might be unstuck now, Michelle. But I agree with you, Deborah. I think it's expanded so much because I think I thought growing up, I think we were taught, well, I was taught, I'm gonna talk from the eye, taught and being like kind of doctrinized around that like liberation means being free, and brand free means being successful, and being successful meaning having this, having that, and making it to this point. And it's like, oh, look at that, versus liberation is it's really a collective. It's a collective. It's not an individual. And like, although each individual gets to have their piece in that. So I think I'm just expanding more and more. And like you said, it's global now. So when we say Black, it's such a global conversation. I'm not talking about me and my block. I'm really talking, or people, Black folks who move like me and like say exactly what I say versus like, no, there's a whole collective. And I love what you keep saying, Deborah Brown. Like when we talk about this vision for liberation, I don't think there's ever going to be one agreed upon way, but we can make an aligned. And I think the one you said like this lined uniform, and when we say uniform, very loosely, like this, we're in alignment that at this end goal, when we all reach our version of liberation, it doesn't give anybody else harm, right? And so, but we're in a line that way versus like, oh, this is what we got to have this. So I've been liking the way up and talking about that today.
Yeah,
That's it for me.
Tamika Mallory and Linda Sarsour are always saying
My
unity, not
computer could mess up,
uniformity.
and then Juwan will come in and like make sure it gets moderated. That's liberation. that Black man will come in, step in, make sure stuff happens while I'm trying to like figure it out. That's liberation. Thank you, Juwan. Thank y'all for keeping up the conversation. Liberation for me looks like Black women, Black men, Black members of the community stepping into and realizing their political agency, wielding it without it being problematic, without it being a thing, almost like we were saying, Dewan, about the first, that there are no more firsts, and that it's not problematic for Black people to exert and wield their political and advocacy power, and that we do that on a regular basis to ensure that we are living in joy and bearing the fruits that our ancestors have worked so hard for us to bear, and that we keep that trend to do that for the generations after us. So with that being said, we're about to wrap up. If you could take 30 seconds and tell us what's the one thing you want everybody watching to know or to walk away from this discussion. 30 seconds, and we will start with Deborah. You're on the clock, sis.
Right. Do the things. Step into your full self. Demand that your human dignity is respected. This space is for you. There is no such thing as you ain't involved in politics, because politics is involved with you every day. So figure it out. Step into your power. Step into the beauty. Demand that people see and respect you, and give space and receive, like Ms. Vivian said. Give space so that other people can join you in this courageous fight.
All right, Deborah, we're here for it. What about you, Duan?
So the movement has to be intergenerational. It has to be innovative. We have to allow ourselves space to laugh and cry and be full humans. And if the world ain't gonna treat us like full humans, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't demand it and shouldn't treat each other that way.
That's right. That's right. And Vivian?
Yeah, with all that was said, and there's always a place to start, no matter where you are in life, no matter what you've done before, after, if you've never been involved. And there's always, just because you are breathing on this planet, you have a place in this, right? And connect with folks, even if you don't know, and reach for folks. So just keep reaching and keep looking to connect. So, and it's never too late, and it's never a starting point.
All right. Well, with that said, my last words are vote on November 3rd. Make sure you bring 2 people with you, and not 2 people who already gonna vote. Bring your cousin Ray and them, the people who ain't paying no attention to this. Make sure they get their butts out to vote. Make sure you stay involved after November 3rd, because it don't end on November 3rd. We may not even have the results on November 3rd. It's only beginning. Also, if you're looking for ways to engage, you can reach out to any of us on this panel. Vivian Anderson with Every Black Girl in South Carolina, DeJuan Bland with Moses Action in Detroit, Michigan, and Deborah Harris with Action Now in Chicago. And if you're not in any of those regions, if you're not in Kansas City and can't get to Shirley's Kitchen Cabinet, visit Community Change. There is an organization where you are that you can join to help support this work. So thank you all for joining us. We are excited to have you all. If this is your first time with this series, we want you back. We will have more of these for you to watch and join in. And if you're feeling energized to join the movement, you can join our work to build Black Power and share your story at our Black at the Polls site, bit.ly/Black at the Polls. We want to hear why voting is important to you. Today's conversation will be immediately available at the Community Change Action social media sites like YouTube and Facebook. So those of you who are able to join us live, or if you want to share this with your friends, you can get caught up later. So like it, subscribe, join the network, join us for our next series, which will be October 28th. Put this in your calendar, 12 p.m. Eastern time. Is going to be our Black at the Polls virtual rally. Just because we in the house don't mean we can't rally. We're about to do this virtually. It's about to be lit. We're going to have music. And guess what? You can bring whatever food and drink you like. You ain't even got to worry about if the potato salad is going to be right. You can make your own and bring it with you to the rally. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Community Change Action for putting this on. Join us on Facebook and YouTube. And yeah, make sure you vote on November 3rd.